questions.
Yes, of course, Mr. President, I would be happy to answer all questions.
Thank you. I'd like to commend our Senate President Pro Temp for once again bringing to light this situation brought about by climate change. And to go straight to the point, I'd like to make: how much does Her Honor believe, in her expert opinion, and I have to say that she would be the expert here, Your Honor, um, she mentioned that, let me give some background to my question first. She mentioned that there is 506.1 billion loss from climate change hazards, basically as a result of climate change. No, that's correct. Now I'm quoting from Her Honor's presentation, 506.1 billion. She also mentioned that the Philippines is now ranked the highest in the ranking of disaster risk based on the latest report. So my question is, for us to be ranked at the highest, no, to achieve that position, and then we have an amount here that we can try to visualize, no, 506 billion. Paano nangyari to? Is it, kasi Your Honor, Mr. Senate President, our colleague has in fairness been bringing this to our attention, been putting funding for this, to the point na kalabugin, let me use that word, yung members ng Climate Change Commission na wala dito nung budget hearing. So it's not for lack of her attention and also the inspiration that she gave the others na buo nga yung ating Climate Change Commission, Your Honor. That would be your law, if I'm not, yeah, that would be your law. And what year?
It was 2009.
Okay.
But I filed it
earlier.
Every year until it was passed.
So I'm just laying the basis that hindi naman tayo nagkulang sa Senate under Her Honor's leadership, no, to bring this to the attention of the whole country, to put funding into it. So when we end up getting ranked number 1 in this highest, we are the country, the Philippines is at the highest disaster risk. How much of that is brought about by our own doings? Kumbaga yung pagkukulang natin, and how much of that is sa hindi naman natin kasalanan, di ba? There are islands na hindi naman nila pinili, pero sila yung unang lulubog, di ba? May ganun eh. So ano dun yung hindi naman natin kasalanan, nagkataon lang na we are in the circle of the typhoon zone, you know? Ano doon yung, kasi yun, baka wala na tayong magagawa unless bumili tayo ng ibang isla sa ibang parte ng mundo.
Okay.
So let's focus on what can we do? Ano dun yung pinagkulang natin na magagawa pa natin?
Thank you very much for that very important question. First of all, Mr. President, we are only a 1/3 of 1% emitter in the world.
Yes, yes.
But yes, we are number 1 in vulnerability and world disaster risk.
Can you repeat now, that? 1/3
we
of
are
1%.
8.3. So we are a 1/3 of 1% global greenhouse gas emitter in the world. Ang Pilipinas po ay isa sa pinaka mababa, ay 1/3 lang po ng 1% ng pagbuga ng greenhouse gas na sanhi po nitong lahat.
Okay.
Pero tayo po ay nararangko dati po ng top 3, top 5. Ngayon po, number 1 na po tayo sa world disaster risk. At sa bawat delubyo, sa bawat ulan, sa bawat isa sa 20 o higit pa po na bagyo, ay ito po kumakain sa GDP po natin. Binanggit ko po yung ating losses nga ay higit na sa 500 billion at ayon po sa Department of Finance ay 48.9 billion or 0.33% of GDP is lost yearly during the same period due to risks due to climate change. In short, tayo po ay vulnerable. So, tama kayo, hindi nating kasalanan, pero kaya nga ang ating advokasya ay hindi lang po mitigation, yung pagpabawas ng pagbubuga ng greenhouse gas emissions, kundi mas mahalaga siguro o kasing halaga ay adaptation. At tayo natutuwa na pinansin na po yung advokasya pa natin na loss and damage na yung mga bansang may kadahilanan ng mga
Ng greenhouse
nangyayari
gas
nito
emissions na
ay
to,
ngayon
sila ang
ay
magbayad.
bibigay na ng
Tama.
pondo. Pero yung adaptation, napakahalaga. Ano ba ho yung adaptation? Yung
Ma'am,
ating
before you go
pag-aakma.
into that, kasi
Yes.
kung ako, gusto ko yan maintindihan na maayos, lalo na ho yung nakikinig sa atin. So bago ka pumunta dun sa adaptation, siguro iliwanag nyo pa yung loss and damage. Ang ibig sabihin nun sa pagkakaintindi ko, pero kayo na ho ang magpaliwanag, yung sabi nyo nga, okay, less than 1% ang kagagawan natin. And yet tayo ang number one na nakakaramdam ng effects ng climate change. So yung mga responsible for this, and we know that these are a lot of the developed countries, yung very industrialized countries, sila ngayon ang gusto nating magbayad, di ba?
Yes.
Ng damages. So pwede liwanag niyo yung concept na yun kasi, and then you go to the part na gusto nyong sabihin na, syempre may responsibility tayo. Bansa natin to, gumigising tayo araw-araw in our country, we have to adapt for our own preservation. But dun muna tayo dun sa, so what can we expect of them and what can we do as citizens, what can we do as legislators to be sure na yung may responsibility naman na yun, bayaran naman nila, pondohan naman nila, yung in effect tayo we carry that burden of their actions that damage the world, and tayo in the Philippines carry that burden.
Kaya nga po tayo ay nagratipika ng Paris Agreement. Nakasaad po sa isa sa mga probisyon ng Paris Agreement yung pagbibigay ng pondo ng ating mga industrialized nations para sa Green Climate Fund. Masalimuot lamang ang proseso ng pag-access ng pondo sa GCF. Pero nung ako po yung naging member ng board na GCF a few years ago, ngayon ito na yata si Commissioner Herrera ang nakaupo sa board dahil hindi ko na po kayang magbiyahe sa Korea tuwing meeting po nun, ay ang Pag-asa po, akma na rin sa Modernization Act, ay naging benepisyaryo ng Green Climate Fund. Pero ilang taon ang proseso. So in short, nagbibigay naman po, ayon sa Paris Agreement, magkano? 100 billion annual? $100 billion ang pananagutan na dapat ibigay ng mga industrialized nations na siyang naging sanhi ng kaganapan ng pagbabago ng klima, the climate crisis, ay sila ang nagbibigay. Hindi pa Englishin ko, they have not reached the $100 billion. But the Philippines, to be fair, has accessed it through Pag-asa.
Pakonti-konti though, hindi 100 billion, tama ba? Pakonti-konti
Yes,
na access natin.
We've only accessed it once, no? Just Pag-asa. 5 projects, but it's not yet in effect.
So,
Kasi
pero more or
may
less magkano po
counter.
yun, yung na-access natin?
How much was the Pag-asa? $10 million. So $10 million. Pero maliit lang po ito eh. Kaya nga po, ito, how many projects were approved? 209 projects were approved, totaling $42.4 billion, in which $11.3 billion were financed by GCF through grants, equities, among others. Pero ito pong 209 ay marami. Ang Pilipinas po ay maraming bansa. Itong 6 ay sa Pilipinas. At kasama dito yung multi-hazard impact-based forecasting and early warning system. I want to say this, Mr. President, na hindi lang dapat tayo umasa sa isang grant gaya ng GCF. Kaya nga po ang ating advokasya, sana it's a whole of nation approach, and I would like to say a whole of GAA approach. Sana po ang bawat galaw natin, ang bawat budget po natin, hindi lamang isang maliit na ahensya ng gobyerno. Dapat ang DA, pag umakto sila, na parang tayo talaga nasa ICU, nasa climate emergency. Ang DNR, ang kanilang pag-manage ng mga PAMBI ng mga protected areas natin, na parang tayo nasa emergency room, nasa ICU, nasa climate crisis. Ang ating DepEd, kailangan yung environmental education awareness na kayo rin po ang nag-author nyon, ay parang nasa emergency, pinupukpok talaga yan ang mga isyong yan. So lahat po ng ahensya ng gobyerno, hindi lang isang ahensya o dalawa, ang climate, iba, kami, business as usual. Kaya nga po, there should be a whole of government, whole of nation approach in addressing the climate crisis. So our accessing one fund based on the climate accord, which is the Paris Agreement, is just one facility that is made available to the Philippines. But this few grants will not change the scenario, will not change the sheer
Agree.
line.
Yes.
Adaptation. Dapat sa bawat lokal na pamahalaan, yung 1,600 LGUs and 42,000 barangays, dibdibin at talagang isa-puso ang pag-aaral, paggagamit ng mga early warning systems, ang paglilikas ng tao, ang paggagamit ng mapping para po hindi magtayo ng mga DepEd schools o ng evacuation center sa kung saan pala guguho ang bundok. So, I hope that all of this, whether you are DNR or DA or DepEd or DOTR, in everything we do, ay kailangan isaalang-alang po ang epekto ng ating ginagawa sa krisis ng klima na nangyayari.
Mr. President, I cannot find the right words to express my sincere gratitude to Her Honor for how she summarized this. Basically, she used the phrase whole of nation approach. I hold here in my hand just a copy of the Sustainable Development Goals. No, I always have this in my drawer because just like Her Honor said, unless in everything we do, unless the government agencies in every project that they undertake can see the bigger picture and work together, we will always fall short of this goal. Because wala nga tayong magagawa no? To a certain extent, yan na yun. Dinatnan na natin, pinanganak na tayo na nandito tayo sa sitwasyon natin. And let me elaborate, and I'd love to hear Her Honor's comment if she agrees with me. So when I look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and I will use similar examples that Her Honor gave, binanggit niya health. So alam naman po ng lahat ng colleague natin na isa sa pinaglalaban ko yan, marami tayong kasama na nagsusupport dyan, si Senator Bongo, our presiding officer, Senator J.V. Ejercito, of course, Her Honor. I'll talk about my passion for recognizing the damage that tobacco and even e-cigarettes and vapes will do to the youth. So when we neglect to see that this is one component, mauubos yung pondo ng pa-raise funds pa tayo, pa-syntax law pa tayo. Pero naman, with our other hand, we are allowing the proliferation of products that will be harmful to the health of the youth. We are not putting enough safeguards. Tinanggal natin sa kamay ng FDA. Then, hindi natin binibigay ang lahat ng pwede natin ibigay to strengthen the health of the Filipinos. Pagdating naman sa education, and baka nakikinig yung colleague natin, I'm sure nakikinig mga kasamahan natin na nasa lounge, ano? I love you, Senator Bato, but I am against the ROTC bill. So we talk about education in my humble view, pag binuhos natin yung energy for every single Filipino youth to understand the Sustainable Development Goals, if they live in the mountains, if they live by the river, bahala silang alagaan yon. Instead of marching, instead of making a mandatory ROTC law, for me, yan yung future natin. Yan yung future na kailangan natin to be prepared for. Because in as much as I'm all for the safety of our country, no, na syempre ayoko naman ma-invade tayo, either an alien species or another neighboring country. But ang ikamamatay siguro po natin, Your Honor, and this is where I will end my intervention, baka ang ikamamatay natin is lack of clean water, lack of air that we can breathe na hindi naman ikamamatay ng mga senior citizens natin, lack of sustainable, nutritious food. Yan malamang ang ikamamatay natin. And that is why I agree with Her Honor. And if she can just give a quick response to this statement that I made, I'm thankful for the opportunity to ask some questions and share my insights.
Thank you so much. In answer to your question about loss and damage, simply put, loss and damage, Mr. President, are the consequences of climate change beyond adaptation. This could be economic or non-economic. Ito po yung mga kung hindi na iba yung mitigation, yung pagbabawas, iba yung pag-a-adapt, ibig sabihin, inaakma natin buhay. Ang loss and damage, ito po yung mga responsibilidad ng mga bansang nagsanhi lahat ito. Itong shear line na binanggit po natin, example po, itong shear line na nagaganap sa Mindanao. Sa DA pa lang, may 315 million na losses at higit sa 10,100 ang ating mga magsasaka. Sa infra, 262 million na ang mga naapektuhan dito at 52 ang namatay. Wala pa silang report sa ecosystems na damage. Tama po kayo, yung Sustainable Development Goals, if we take it seriously and take it to heart, alam niyo po, nung chairman ako ng finance, you were congressman, I think at the time,
Yes.
I placed it in the overarching provisions in the GAA that our whole GAA must be aligned with the SDGs.
Yes.
What year was that? I think for 2 or 3
Mga
years.
2016,
2016,
2017, that
yes.
was in the House, and we continue it here. Thank you
Very
for that,
good.
Your
Yes,
Honor.
I'm so glad. So, you're correct. Kung seryosohin natin, hindi lamang sa DENR or Climate Change Commission. Tama kayo, sa health, sa edukasyon, sa lahat ng ahensya ang gobyerno, ay siguro ay maaagapan natin ang krisis ng klima, pag-akma ang ating pamumuhay at pagbibigay ng budget sa mga ahensya ng gobyerno alinsunod sa Sustainable Development Goals. Kaya maganda sigurong gawin ng ating secretariat, may mungkahi po ako, sa bawat SDG, ilagay natin ang epekto sa climate crisis, i-marry natin bawat SDG. Let's say, the climate crisis sa health. O, itong SDG 1, SDG 2, yung epekto nito at anong solusyon o anong batas ang existing na sa Pilipinas, anong programa ng gobyerno ang nag-address. I'll say it in English, perhaps it's faster. So we will align the SDGs with the aspects of the climate crisis, taking into consideration all existing laws or proposed legislation and programs of government which are already addressing the specific SDG which is not complied with because of the climate crisis. If there is lacking legislation or policy or funding that is missing, then we can address it. So we can have a matrix of the SDG vis-a-vis climate crisis, vis-a-vis policy, legislation, and budgeting.
I agree wholeheartedly, but if I may just add, what I realized in the last few years also, in addition to what Her Honor has said, is that we review our laws and even the bills that are still pending to ensure that they are aligned. Because sadly, Your Honor, there are bills that are pending, there are laws that we have passed that may have, definitely, obviously may purpose yun, ano? May purpose po yun. Pero it is possible na hindi sustainable yung plano na yon, Your Honor. So again, babanggitin ko yung favorite example ko, ang e-cigs and vapes. Sabi daw, alternative to smoking. And yet, we get it from the experts, there is not sufficient evidence to say that that is a proper alternative. So stop promoting it, especially with the youth, dahil kung hindi naman safe, edi may bagong addiction na naman tayo, di ba? So yun naman yung point ko, Your Honor, na it is even more difficult to be able to look at the laws we've passed and say, not so aligned. What can we do to amend this so that we are more aligned? Because otherwise, Your Honor will agree that we are siphoning funding that could be going to saving lives and putting it in places where it is not really, sometimes not needed at all, or not efficient use of our funds. So I agree, dadagdagan ko pa nga no, na parang, so on my part, Your Honor, I can commit to our colleagues that I try to look at every bill that we are discussing through the lens of sustainability. Para naman may contribution tayo to sustainability. Kasi nga baka may particular goal na hinahabol, pero hindi siya sustainable. I'll give you an example, Your Honor, and our chairman of the Committee of Energy addressed my concern in the last Congress when I brought this up. Nagpupush tayo ng energy efficient vehicles. Pero may situation in the Philippines na in our desire to push for energy efficient vehicles, hindi naman dumaan sa proseso itong ibang vehicles na kumuha ng franchise. Ang nangyari, nakadagdag ng isang katutak na traffic na taking away valuable time of people's lives, quality of life na dagdag sa traffic because may dagdag na public vehicles na hindi naman kumuha ng franchise. So my point, Your Honor, is if we continue to work together, we can ensure that our bills and the laws that we pass are more sustainable. Yun lang naman yung point ko, Your Honor.
I'm so glad. I am ever grateful. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. And yes, all the actions we take must be aligned with the SDGs, even if the SDGs will expire
In 2030.
in 2030.
7 years.
Within 7 years, and we have not even reached our targets. And let me just state, Mr. President, siguro pagkatapos po ng Sustainable Development Goals, in fact, dapat ngayon, hindi ba dapat restorative? Kasi ang sustainable, sinusustain lang natin. Pero kung restorative ang attitude natin, gusto natin i-restore mula sa kanyang panimula. Ibig sabihin kung nasira, hindi lang natin sustaining it is, the way it is now. O yan, wag mong abusuhin. But restoring it is even going one step further. But that's for the United Nations to decide. It's something that came across my mind because we want to leave this world in a better place than when we found it. We don't just want to leave it and sustain it, leave it, ganyan na. Pagandahin pa natin.
Of course.
Kaya ako po'y natutuwa at gagawa po ako ng resolution. Sana mag-co-author kayo yung aking mungkahi ng bawat Sustainable Development Goal. How has it become seemingly unattainable because of the climate crisis? And how has the Philippines responded by legislation or by budgetary allocation if we have done it? That is something which perhaps the LBRMO and the Secretariat, Attorney Garcia and everyone, DepSec Balen, can help us with. So thank you very much, Mr. President, to my esteemed colleague for her very enlightened interpellations.
Thank you, Senator Piquet.